All right, guys, what up? I'm back with Tyrone Glover, and we are going to get into this shit. How are you, man?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
I'm good, man. I would say I think one of the cool things for us anyway, and I want to say that we need to figure out how to do it is like you and I on this whole Black Lives Matter, on everything, right? We agree very much at the top on the main thing. All the way down at the bottom, some of the finer details, we might not agree on everything, and that's cool. You know, like you might be a little over here and but we're not far apart. And that's okay. And we have to have some space for this, but goddamn, we got to figure out how to get everyone on board with what it is we're trying to, what it is that we're trying to say. Because it doesn't have to, it's not
basic
terrible.
Proposition, right? And I got to say, this time around, people's understanding of, the call and what needs to be done, people are just more sophisticated about the topic, which is why I think you're seeing more momentum around everything and why it's stayed in the national consciousness much longer.
Why was it such an issue before? What do you think?
You mean
Black Lives Matter? I'm not talking about the organization. We don't have to talk about the organization, right? Because we know organizations can do dumb shit and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, but just the current movement is a coalition of a lot of different organizations and just people who are concerned and want to help out.
Like that's what it is, right? Like you're not a member of Black Lives Matter, like the organization, right? I mean,
that's a political organization. There's multiple factions. There's like a Black Lives Matter 5280, but this Black Lives Matter movement it's everybody, and there's like a coalition of people from all walks of life.
Exactly. Yeah. So what is everyone saying, and where was that separation before? First, let's start with what is Black Lives Matter? The coalition, not the political organization.
Yeah. What I would say is this notion that, in this country, right, we are all equal, right? We all deserve justice. We all deserve freedom. We all deserve the same things. And it's a recognition that over time and over history, certain people, Black people, have been subjugated, right? We've built this country on a system of racism and white supremacy. And people are just sick and tired of it. I think this came along at a time when people were being very introspective because of the pandemic, where people were sort of hyper-focused on this issue. And that's, part of the problem is previously, it's easy to just sort of gloss over issues of racism and think, oh, we just need to be nicer to each other. We just need to not hate. And, as long as I have goodness in my heart, then it's going to be all good. But it's so much more complicated than that. And I think that we had that sort of hyper focus and that introspection this time around because of the pandemic, to where people were like, no, now the light bulb went on. We get it. There are systematic problems. These keep repeating themselves because the system is racist. It's not even necessarily the individuals. It's a system that is set up to subjugate people, and we're sick and tired of it, and we can dismantle it. And then when everyone's equal, when Black lives matter, then all lives can matter.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has ever said all lives don't matter, right?
Right. But in order for all lives to matter, Black lives have to matter, right?
Because right now they're struggling, right? Because of a system. Not because my neighbor Dave is a racist, right?
And not even because the human being cops are racist. It's the system that they're in, right? It's those influences of that system that produce this racism, and this outcome that's happens over and over again has been happening since the beginning of time. And I think for all lives to matter, Black lives have to matter, women's lives have to matter, LGBTQ folks have to matter, trans folks have, But, racism really is sort of the foundation of our country's political, social, and economic systems. And so I think that's where it takes priority, especially right now. We need to dismantle that. And I think it gives way to just all boats rising once we sort of are all committed to justice and equality going forward.
What do you think it was that George Floyd's death did that got, Tucker Carlson and Hannity when just the death part, right? Just that video, when all the people who just go nuts to the other side. What do you think it was about this video that got those people, you know, to agree that holy fuck, this is bad.
I mean, it had to be like the perfect case, unfortunately, right?
Right.
If you look at like civil rights cases in the history, you look at like Brown v. Board of Education, Plessy v. Ferguson, right? Like there were other lawsuits they could have brought, right? But they had to find that perfect plaintiff that had that fact pattern that no one could poke holes in. And that's what George Floyd was. Like, you know, there was no resisting. There was nothing that people could point to. There was no officer, you know, danger. There was no split-second decision. You know, it went longer than like most of our freaking matches go, right? And he just sat there for, you know, 9 minutes killing this guy in broad daylight with tons of people around telling him to stop. It was just, it was too perfect. And I think, you know, a lot of people had been sort of saying in their minds, well, but this and but that, and here's all these different ways to deflect and divert and enable me to kind of go back to my own, my sort of comfortable existence. But you couldn't ignore this one. It was just too horrendous. It was just so obviously murder. And so that's why I think it's gotten national attention on top of people being hyper-focused on what's going on in the world.
God, yeah, your point with the pandemic, right? Like, it's going to be a delineator for our lives, like right now, right? Like what did you do before? What were you doing before and what were you doing after, right? Because like there was a halt to the whole world, you know? And I think that really added to, like you said, the like, holy shit, man. Like I know from my friend Lee, you know, Leister, right? Leister never got Black Lives Matter before. He never, you know, he was like, man, all lives matter. Like a lot of people were, you know? But when he sat down and thought about it this time, like he changed his mind. Like the next day he sat his kid down, you know, and was like, yo, not cool. Like your friends can't make a racist joke, even if it's a little one, right? Like, because it's not cool because it's not equal right now.
Right. It never has been. Yeah, and I think, you know, that's great. I would rather have non-racist Leister than racist Leister, right? But
and I would never say Leister was a racist, right? Leister wasn't going around like Leister. I think Leister's three of his four, like he's around African Americans and Mexicans and has friends. Yeah. He's not, but he couldn't see the system, right? Is what I would say.
Being indifferent to a racist system,
right,
and benefiting from that racist system is racist. It's not racist in the sense that you hate people.
Right.
It's racist in the sense that you go about your daily lives while people are subjugated by this system and while you benefit and you do nothing.
Nothing.
So, I mean, people, there's such a like stigmatism around sort of being like around racist, right? We're not saying that you outwardly hate other people, but it's being blind to a system or benefiting from the system. There's degrees, right? And now that he realizes, you know, hopefully that there is this racist system out there, he will be called to do things in the space and act and continue to like spread a message. But it's fine. I mean, it's not fine, but you know, I think that we can't continue from this point forward saying that people that know there's this system and turn a blind eye to it and are willfully ignorant to it are somehow not complicit in it.
Yeah, I read, I did a short podcast about it today. I was reading this book, Leadership in Turbulent Times, you know, and it was describing Lincoln. And it was talking about his second election in 1864, you know, and how the person running against him, George McClellan, was anti-slavery, but to the point where he didn't want emancipation, where he wanted to just end the war and then work out the slavery thing after, right? Where Lincoln was at this point in time for his second election was a hardcore emancipation. You know, he wrote the Emancipation Proclamation, and the McClellan side was very positive that they were going to get 2/3 of the soldier vote, right? The Union soldiers, because look, that's in their best interest to vote for McClellan, right? Because they'll get, whether they believe in emancipation or not, they get to end the war. They get to go home. There's no death for them anymore, right? Like all of that is gone. Like it's better for those people, the soldiers, to vote McClellan because their lives would get so much better.
Right.
More so than anybody's life would be better now, right? That didn't happen.
Right.
By a 70% rate, the soldiers voted for Lincoln, which was voting for emancipation, and knowing that their lives were going to continue to be worse. That's what we need right now. We need something like that where people can go, okay, this might not be the best for me personally, but it will be for everyone. And then we all can grow.
Right. Then we improve our collective condition.
Yeah.
Once Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, I mean, there still are subjugated groups that we need to address, but, we're closer to all lives matter.
Right.
And when that happens, it improves our collective condition. The reason things haven't improved isn't necessarily because we have all of these bad actors. We have a lot of people who maybe don't have hate in their hearts, but they're indifferent and they do nothing and they're silent. And so they're complicit in the system that oppresses these people. And I think that if it's okay to say, like, look, yeah, I've been sort of part of this system. I haven't stood up. I haven't been anti-racist. I haven't been an emancipator. So I understand I played a role, and it's okay. Because now I can wake up, I can play a role, I can sit down like your boy Leister did with this kid and say, like, hey, don't tell, if you hear racist jokes, don't be racist, whatever. But then from that point forward, he can't be he's not in the dark anymore. Right. He needs to kind of continue to walk the walk. And, I know he's a strong-willed person. He's got strong opinions. And, I could see him as the kind of person who could be like a real, leader.
Yeah, he's going to come on the town hall and talk on Saturday.
And that's what I see. That's what I'm seeing, Elliot. I'm seeing like people like that, once they sort of acknowledge it and they acknowledge like, wow, yeah, there's this system and it's messed up. They're like kind of people who are down to ride, right? And they're down to come on town halls and they're down to like, call people out who are being willfully ignorant. And we just need more of that.
And he's not going to come on and apologize for being white, right? And I don't think that's not what anybody's asking for. Like you see these white people getting down on their knees and kissing the feet of black people in an apology. This shit's fucking stupid. Stop that, right? Like I don't need you to kiss my feet. No, you don't need a white person to kiss your fucking feet, right? No, it's not what this is about. There's no apology needed. Like, I get it. You didn't actually do that, but you got to understand you're complicit and let's get to fucking work.
Exactly. Get to work.
Let's get to work.
Light bulb is on. Light bulb is on. Let's get to work.
And we have to realize too, that for some people it's not, they're not going to be a black belt in one day, right? Like they got to go through the stages a little bit of like, okay, oh shit, and get educated. So I think a lot of the process is education, right? And I know you're big on this, right? Like of really educating people of what the system is.
Yeah. There's so many resources out there, right? Like people forward me stuff all the time. Like I engage in sort of back and forth dialogue with people. There's just so much out there. And because people have been so hyper-focused on it, I'm just seeing the overall sort of baseline level of knowledge around these issues just go up. But, even before you're there, just, bring what you have to the movement, bring what you have to the table, right? If you have an audience online, speak out, right? If you have like tens of thousands of followers, if you're an artist, I was at a protest the other day and this husband and wife came down. They weren't going to protest, because they couldn't come out, but they had made this amazing banner for us to like carry. There's people, going around passing out water, passing out snacks. There's people who are at home because they don't have childcare, but they're phoning their senators. We in Colorado just passed some very bold, aggressive legislation around policing. And we were able to get it through, and and right around the week. And I think and we had huge bipartisan support. And that's from people, who can't make it to the rallies in Denver, but they're in like Pueblo or they're, up in Fort Collins and they're calling their lawmakers, making
Can you
sure
explain the legislation? What changed?
So there's a bunch of different things, qualified immunity, I think is a big one. Because when these
qualified immunity.
So when these police officers, do wrong, they can really do so with impunity, right? Because at the end of the day, it's the district attorney's office who relies heavily on the police and the police support deciding whether they're going to get charged. And if they get sued subsequently, it's the taxpayers that indemnify them. So you kill somebody and your family sues you and there's $1 million verdict. It's you and I that pay for it. And the officers get completely indemnified. And if they don't get fired, they go about business as usual because of this law called qualified immunity, right? Without qualified immunity, they have some skin in the game. Now it's not 100%, right? Because if it was 100%, families and people who've been wrong wouldn't get paid. But it's, I think it started at 10%. It got chipped away a little bit at, but it's definitely enough to have some teeth.
Sure. If somebody gets $1 million, if you owe 100 G's,
right?
That's a motherfucker.
And if your partner, if that happens to someone in your precinct or your partner, it starts to, send a bit of a message.
Let me ask you a question. It starts to make me like, if you and I are partners as a police officers, right? And I see you haven't killed anybody yet, but I see you acting a fool a little bit.
Right.
It's going to make me go, yo, hold on. You
kind of had your hand on your weapon a little bit early on that.
Right.
Hey, that chokehold was, we're not supposed to do chokeholds. Right? Hey, you didn't have to hold that taser so long, right?
God, I can't understand the chokehold thing. Why the fuck do you need to choke anybody? Like, I mean, look, I understand why they, I guess, okay, they have a gun, right? So yeah. I don't think you or I would ever say that police never need to shoot anybody.
No. I think that when there is violence and there's a threat, and that's part of the defund movement, right? It's like, why do we have armed police showing up to non-violent situations, right? And then escalating them into violent situations, right? But if there's a violent situation, if there's a crazy man with a gun, then police. Please.
Very, very much so. Yeah. It's the same thing with the chokehold. I think we saw Matt Serra do it. Like, that guy attacked him, right? That guy full on attacked him, and then he just mounted him, right? Yeah. And was like, dude, I can choke. Like, of course he could have choked him. Right? He's a UFC fucking champion. He totally could have choked him.
He's also not a part of this system. That encourages, the boys to use their toys. When you have all this militarization, when you have the guns and the tanks, the ability to hip throw people and choke them, and you have a system that encourages that level of brutality, that's how it plays out, right? When you're used to people, when you're, Matt Serra is a UFC fighter, right? He's not someone who's in this system that has roots in slave catching and Jim Crow, that we see this cycle of violence just repeat itself over and over again. So that's where I see a distinction.
Oh, of course, right? Yeah, there's no reason to.
Choke.
There's no reason to choke anybody. I saw a video the other day of a larger male cop choking a black lady, and he didn't choke her unconscious, but he's like, I'm going to put you to sleep. And you're like, why are you doing that? What the fuck is the matter with you?
If you have tanks, you're going to roll the tanks out, right? If you've got a machine gun, you're going to roll. And if you know how to choke people and you're in this system that encourages that level of brutality and violence, you're going to do it.
Yeah. I think it's, I don't know. And I'm going to ask this question. I don't know if I fully understand it, but you know how to choke people, right? Is it about the choke, or is it about the system that you're in? Because you know how to choke people and you don't choke anybody.
Right. It's about the system, right?
Okay.
And it's about, the resources being put into the system that allow people to be, more militarized, more brutal, right? When you're giving them more tools of brutality, and there is a system and a culture of brutality against these, neighborhoods you're policing, right? They're going to use them. If policing is reimagined, do I think that those same officers would be throwing out chokeholds? Probably not. It's a different system. It's a different there's a different incentive structure, right? There's different resources. Like, if there's more of this sort of community policing, focus, as opposed to, this sort of almost occupational militarized type focus, then it's arguably different, right? But when you have things as bad, and there's not, I think, a single lawmaker out there who's not saying there should be reform. It's really the debate between, do we reform it or do we abolish it and build it from the ground up? But until something happens, I just think it's irresponsible to continue to arm them with stuff to make them more brutal. And I think I see choking being better at choking is one of those things.
Yeah. Being better at choking is not cool.
Yeah.
Look, I like getting better at choking, and we both got better at choking, bro.
Yeah.
Right? Like we both got really good at choking. And my goal is to never choke somebody for real, you know?
And we can kill people. Like, you know, the tap gives us this sort of false sense of safety. You know, we hold those chokes 1 minute longer, right? Done. They're done. On an anaconda, on a darce, on a rear naked choke, on any of those chokes. Kill someone. Right?
Dude, I even think
we get used to people tapping, and we're thinking, oh, this isn't that bad.
Right. And I really even think like your comment with this whole thing, and we'll leave the martial arts part here in a second, with like the boys and their toys, you know, like, yeah, those guys, like, I fucking shot my gun, you know, like, but like, I think you're seeing it, like, go watch the UFC right now. Right. And watch, because there's no crowds and there's no spectators and there's no one in the arena. When somebody knocks the other person out very brutally, you can almost see how bad the person who threw the punch, feels, because they're looking at that person. Go watch, go back. Yeah. You don't see people going nuts.
Yeah.
Right. You don't see them going nuts.
They're not like jumping on the cage.
Yeah.
And yelling at their opponent.
Because the system has changed.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's not the energy and the craziness. Like somebody gets like,
there's not that like bloodlust from the crowd.
Yeah.
That brutality.
You can really see the difference. Like people like, oh shit, that motherfucker's hurt.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And we need to realize that, you know?
Yeah.
And again, and I know we're talking about policing right now, man. Of course we need cops, right? So we're going to get into this defund thing here in a second, right? Like you can't have no cops. You're not like, defund doesn't mean no cops, like get rid of all police. No. Like, so talk about defund.
You know, I think that when you look at like the most policed in most at-risk neighborhoods, right, there's a common theme. You see tons of money going to law enforcement, right? Both public money and private resources. And what you don't see is money going to schools, going to mental health, going to health and nutrition, you know, going to resources for families who are struggling. You know, there's all of these areas that are just void of funding and void of resources and void of really just, you know, even people in the community to help. And you have these like massively overfunded police forces. And so the whole defund movement essentially says, look, you know, as opposed to continuing to try to tweak this little Etch-a-Sketch, let's just shake it, and then let's figure out how to rebuild this thing in a way that makes more sense and actually serves our communities. You know, should we have, you know, people who actually have mental health training, right? Like not just like a few hours showing up to mental health calls. Should we have more sort of like counseling type folks responding to domestic disputes that do not appear to be that aggravated? Should we have more like social worker types in our schools as opposed to like police? When they introduced a ton of police to schools, all that happened is more kids got arrested and got sent to detention centers. And then, okay, once we've sort of done that, how many, you know, cops do we need that respond to violent stuff? What does that now look like? Are there tiers? Are there levels of policing? Does everyone need to, you know, have the same, you know, almost militarized resources, if at all? It's just, you know, instead of trying to constantly tweak this system that's been broken since it started, let's just reimagine what, you know, community, you know, really what serving and protecting our community looks like. And so that's what defund, it's really like defund, divest, reinvest.
Yeah. Like you do, like when you build a business again, right? We take the, like that's how you save a defunct business, like a crashing business, right? You take the money out, you see, okay, what do I got? You got to fire some people, right? Like you got to get rid of some, you got to make cuts. And then it's not like it's not like you don't reinvest. No. You definitely reinvest to build back up, but you don't just keep paying the shitty employee that, you know,
and just tweaking little things, right? Yeah. You get to a point where it's like, all right, we're just going to kind of divest it and then figure out what we're going to do going forward, right? And I think that's what needs to happen with, you know, and we're going to see, you know, because there are, you some cities that are doing it. And
so, and I don't know much about it, but like what's going on in Seattle right now? What, like,
no, I haven't been super following it. No.
It sounds a little crazy what's going on in Seattle.
Like almost like kind of an Occupy 2020, right?
Yeah, where they won't even let the cops come.
Yeah.
And I haven't followed much, so I was wondering if you had. So we'll just leave that alone then.
Yeah, I haven't been super on top of it. But it's, it all to me is in the same vein, right? Like in order to get people to move, sometimes you got to clamp down the lid and you got to turn up the heat. That's one of the lawyers I work with a lot. It's sort of a philosophy he taught me, because certain people will move once they've been enlightened, but other people won't even you can't even get eyes on the problem until they're sweating a little bit. And so, when Seattle, I'm sure Seattle is trying to figure out how can we get this to end? We need this to stop. We need this to end. And they're actually giving the problems that these people are most likely protesting about their due attention. Finally, I would hope so. Otherwise, this kind of stuff continues.
Yeah, I can't really talk about it, but I thought maybe you would know, but I don't.
I don't know enough about it to talk about it.
Okay. So we're going to leave Seattle, but you recently were part of the legislation over the weekend, or at the end of last week, to get the police out of schools, right? And because you hear so much, especially like with these mass shootings, right? Which, let's point out, have all been in rich neighborhoods, right?
And none of which were stopped by police officers.
Right. Yeah. So, why get and I know the answer, but I want you to explain the answer. What's the problem with the police in the schools?
I mean, the police in schools, and they're typically sent into the poorer neighborhoods, right? They're not sent in to stop mass shootings. They're sent in there to police kids, who in at-risk problem areas. The problem is this sort of school to jail pipeline, right? Now, the rough and tumble scrappy kids, I was a scrappy kid in school. You get in that little fight on the schoolyard. Now you're getting charged with assault, and now you're getting arrested by a police officer, and you're being taken down to, the juvenile hall, the juvenile detention center, where then you sit until you have court and you can bond out, right? Or you're let out on some sort of pretrial. But all the while, you're linking up with other kids who are coming in there. And, these kids that go through this system and get sort of numb to this system have a much higher likelihood of being involved in the criminal justice system again. So that's when you talk about it's creating this pipeline of kids, putting them in cages, for fights and little sort of innocuous things that ultimately result in them, now, finding themselves entangled in the criminal justice system when they're adults. And so having more resources for kids, right? You have a cop in your school, but you don't have a counselor. You don't have a social worker, right? You don't have any of that stuff, but you have a cop that will arrest your kid and take him to the detention center. Just, I think, creates the wrong environment.
And I know we're definitely, I'm about to hate a little bit. I don't think you've hated on cops as a whole yet, but I know the cops in my neighborhood sometimes, dude, they piss me the fuck off. They'll be at the school, and I'll try to say hello. Dude, come on. I mean, you've been to my house.
Yeah.
I live in the nicest fucking neighborhood. Not mansion wise, right? But as far as crime wise,
urban neighborhood.
Yeah, man, I live in the nicest fucking neighborhood you could fucking live in. As far as what traffic tickets, I mean, I'm sure there's domestic violence, but as far as crime, fuck. Would somebody steal a bike? And I try to walk up and say hello. Nothing. And I'm like, God damn, do you know how far would, instead of the idea of you are here to police me, the idea of, hey, how are you? How are you today, sir? Oh, I'm good, man. I have a great day. Thanks for being here. If we could get that into a young black kid, Mexican kid, minority poor kid's brain of the cops are actually there on their side, not sitting in their school to arrest them if it goes poorly, man, that would go so far, because I know it pisses me off, but I'm an adult and I'm not scared. When you're a kid, man, when an adult is a dick to you, it's fear that comes out.
Yeah. And they're there and they're there to arrest. They're there to enforce the law. They're there to be police. Right. And, the way that he's acting it's not like he's this isolated officer who's that's a product of their system. Like you and I, when we were fighting, we all sort of bounced and sort of did our things to make ends meet because we were training during the day, right? Before you could go full time.
Right.
And think certain places, there was a culture of how you treated, your customers and the people that were there. Right. And some, the bouncers were just dicks. Right. And
me included. I get it with the system thing because me included, we were dicks.
Right. And so that's like the system. The system tells them that that's how you go into these schools and that's how you roll and that's how you act. And if you see any kids acting up, you crack some heads and you throw them in the squad car and you take them down to the detention center. And that's
because you have the power.
You have the power.
Because you have the power. Man, that's such a great point because I can remember, let's look at the bouncing thing. That is such a, man, it made me click for me.
And so when I discount the hundreds of racist history of police,
right? Yeah.
Bouncing, but there are some parallels.
There's a similarity. Like I can remember when I first started bouncing at the bar that I bounced at, that was the rep. And dude, the football players would come in and the football players are big enough. They didn't give a fuck. It could get ugly, right? Because they had the same power, physical, because now we're only talking physical power, right? Getting into a fight that we did. Dude, I had to de-escalate that shit. I had to make friends with the football players because I could fight at the time, but they could too because they were just so big and strong. And there's 10 of them and 10 of us. Dude, I'm going to get hurt too. Right?
So with tabletops and all.
Yeah, man. So we had to go about it so differently to calm the situation down. We had to become friends, not enemies. And then once we were able to become friends, dude, we had no more problems. No more problems with the football team because the football team handled their shit. We handled our shit and now we're friends. Mm-hmm. Forget about the racism for a sec, right? But just imagine that for a second.
Yeah.
If we were all actually in the community, the cops in our house lived down the street, and just what that would look like on a different scale of policing.
Yeah. Or there were cops that weren't expected to be armed to the teeth, right? Who their job was more to sort of be liaisons to the community, just sort of walk the beat and say hey, how's it going, guys? Just wanted to make sure, just sort of checking in on everybody, not in a way where they're trying to, but just sort of having a presence, that's not as a police officer, but is more just sort of as a community liaison, somebody, a representative, there's all these roles, right? That can sort of flow in and actually serve and protect the community that we're unable to do because the police are so entrenched in what they're doing now. And they're so well funded.
I don't hit my kids, really, And when we talk about protect, I do protect them. I do serve them. They are bad sometimes. They do get in trouble. But I have to do it with love, right? I have to be okay, what's the example I want to, I have the power. Of course I have the power. Mm-hmm. What's the example I want to set for my kids? How do I serve and protect them? Because on the side of every cop car, it says to serve and protect. What does that need to look like?
That's the culture of your household, right? That's the culture that you and your wife and your kids sort of build, right? And you have ownership of it. And that's why you get to decide that, right? So, and if it were just nothing was working, I'm sure you guys would probably sit down and say, all right, let's just sort of scrap this and get some books out or go to counseling and figure out what's going to work, right?
It would defund my household.
Right, you defund, right? You scrap all the stuff that wasn't working and build it from the ground up, and that's what I think, I think that there's more and more people sort of realizing that needs to be the approach.
Yeah. I want to go to the riots for a second, and how it is that the movement, this coalition of Black Lives Matter, right, has been, it's going to take the blame for the riots, right? Because what you're doing is not rioting, right? And you don't even, and the people that are rioting have nothing to do with the Black Lives Matter movement. They're mostly just some punk kids, right? So where's that connection, and where like, because you see, I'm for the movement, but not the riots. Like, what do we do with that? How do we talk about this and get through this? And, it's such a,
it's, and I think the people that, they don't want you to interrupt their game by kneeling, right? They don't want you to interrupt their lives. They want you to like get a permit and have a little parade downtown and keep your voices down and be in by the time the ordinance is done, right? Like they want like a protest that isn't actually like a protest, right? So that they can ignore it. And I feel like people ignore these sort of very peaceful cries for help, these peaceful cries for change. And so maybe my takeaway is if you continue to ignore that, riots are inevitable. Like violence is inevitable. So listen the next time someone is trying to tell you something nonviolent.
Yeah, listen.
Yeah, to me, it's just deflecting. It feels very all lives matter to try to, turn the attention to the riots and the property damage. People have been telling you like, my life matters. My life matters. And like, yeah, whatever. I need to watch my football game, right? Or yeah, whatever. Go walk around the Capitol. And then, the same thing keeps happening. The bill that just passed in Colorado last week died in committee this last legislative session, right? Because it couldn't get the support that it needed. But then suddenly, and I'm not advocating for, rioting or property damage, but suddenly there's these huge protests and they're, and the lid is down, the heat is up, and they're calling emergency sessions and they're passing this law, and it went through in a week and it was like 53-13 with tons of Republicans supporting it. So
they passed the same bill, you're saying?
Same bill.
Nothing different.
Right. This one probably is even better than the last one was going to be.
So yeah, why don't you guys,
just why can't we do that after? People are talking non-violently, and then stuff doesn't have to get all escalated. I'm not advocating for it, but it sort of is like,
it worked.
Dr. King said, it's the voice of the unheard, right? When you're unheard, rioting is inevitable.
Again, on a simpler note, let's move it off of the race issue. You have babies, right?
Yeah.
How old are your babies?
I have twins that are going to be 2, and then I have a 4-year-old.
Okay. So your twins aren't really talking yet.
No.
Right? When they need something, they start to make noise.
Yep.
Right? And then when you're not paying attention, a lot of times they'll hit you in the face. They'll hit you. They'll smack you. Yeah. Right? Because they're unheard. You are not meeting a need of theirs. Right? That's what happens. You, think about you and your wife. You ignore your wife, and she might not hit you. I hope she doesn't hit you. Right? But you ignore her problem. She's trying to state it nicely. And we've all been here in a marriage, right? Everyone's been here. And then the next thing you know, she's fucking screaming at you. And you're like, whoa, why are you screaming?
Yeah.
And she's like, well, I tried this, boom, and nothing. So now I have your attention.
Right.
And you've done it too as a husband, right? Like, look, I tried all these other ways.
Yeah, you're just not,
right? Yeah. So you don't want to hear me, I'll escalate. And that's what we do until we're heard. So again, no one is advocating looting or rioting. Never.
No.
But listen to Kaepernick's knee.
Right. I don't know. I sue the city, I sue the government all the time. And if they're sitting there comfortable, right, if they don't feel pressured to act, they don't do anything, right? And so you got to find ways to put, pressure on them politically, socially, economically.
Financially. Right? Yeah, financially.
And, if these lawmakers, if these communities would act when people spoke out peacefully, then I don't think it would escalate to riots. But I think by just not hearing people, it escalates to that level time and time again. And if you look back at big sweeping social changes that happen at, either the community level, a lot of times they are preceded by some pretty nasty, social unrest.
Yeah. It sucks that it has to go this way.
Right. Like no one wants it to go that way, but it's like, if you don't listen to people, what do you think they're going to do?
All right, man. I want to end with a little question, for, because you hear this all the time when you talk about like with George Floyd, right? You hear the obvious racists, you know, and look, I posted on my social media about it. Don't delete these people and don't block them. Let them fucking scream it, right? Let them scream it so that we don't forget.
Yeah.
You know, you don't want them to like be able to hide under the fucking rug anymore. We didn't know exactly who they are.
And don't forget the people who were silent and complacent.
Right.
You know? Like I always wonder, like, what were people doing during civil rights, movement, during the Holocaust, during all these big, social movements that now sit around and probably take credit for, having been on the right side of history, right? Remember the people who just sat around comfortable, right, and continue to promote their own self-interest. Sorry.
So, it's okay. No, I agree. That was great. Here's my question, and it's kind of like the racist argument. Tyrone, only 9 unarmed black guys were killed by cops last year. What's the problem?
Yeah, that's not right. That's just not right. I'm sorry.
But that's what I've heard.
More unarmed black guys who got killed by cops, and we're suing more people than that right now. Maybe that didn't make like the news,
right?
Or didn't make like, didn't go viral. I was just down in Colorado Springs, like for a protest. There were more than that. Like, I mean, maybe not all last year, but there were, I feel like there were 2 in the last like 3 or 4 months.
There's
like,
2 in the last 3 weeks. There's the Rashad Brooks right. And then George Floyd. So just in the past month, we've got 2.
Yeah, there's not. Yeah. I don't know where that statistic comes from. Like, you can go, you can name more than that has probably happened in Colorado, right?
So, okay. So I guess like the overall argument they're making is it's like the percentage of things, of stops, of interactions that go poorly is low, right? So why all the complaining?
Because it's like the root of the problem, right? I hear the statistics like, more black people are killed by just other black people, not cops, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you commit crimes against people you're in proximity with, right? Like people in LA are not killing people in Denver. They're killing other people in LA. And so then if you have like these terrible conditions in your communities, right, where you've sucked all the resources out of your community and put them into things like law enforcement, and now you have high crime, that's going to be the outflow from it. And then to add sort of insult to injury, and I think sort of like the almost symbol of that is then you send these militarized police into the community to, quote, serve and protect, when actually all they're trying to do is preserve the status quo and do what they've always been, meant to do since the inception of policing, is protect the interests of, well-off white.
Of the haves.
Right.
Of the haves.
And so it's really like a, it's kind of like at the root, it's like at the foundation of this like system that people are kind of waking up and saying like, yeah, I understand. I used to think it was just like, as long as I didn't hate black people or I told people not to hate black people, it's enough. But now I see this system and I see how it works. And it's, we've had enough, cell phone videos and over the last decade that now we can see how it repeats itself. This is systematic. And the policing is kind of that like original sin in a way, right?
Yeah. The black on black crime is, I mean, look, if you're
more white people kill more white people kill white people,
right? Yeah.
Right?
And like, look, man, like if you're a poor black kid in the hood, you can't go kill a white person. You'll get arrested for that. Where like if you most likely you kill another poor black kid in the hood, you're going to get away with that because black lives don't matter. Yeah. Right. But you kill a white kid, you kill a rich white kid for the Jordans versus a poor black kid for the Jordans. You kill that white kid, you're going to get caught.
White kid with Jordans in your, poor neighborhood, right? Like they're not going to be there. They're going to be in.
And they're not. Yeah. So that's the not there part is very important as well.
I mean, people, when you look at, because so much crime is domestic, right?
Right.
It's people that you're in relationships with, that you're friends with, that are your family, right? It's people in your neighborhood. So much crime is out of desperation. So it's committed sort of in close proximity to you, especially economic stuff. You know, people in Denver aren't like rolling up to Boulder even, right? Like just 30 minutes up the road and committing crimes against like people in
It's
Boulder.
so rare. Yeah. It's not happening. No, not at all. So last question here. What do we do? What can my neighbor, Josh Durfee, white guy, and he's great. I love him. But what can he do to actually help? Like, what can anybody do? What are the steps we can take when you say it's no longer okay to be complicit? How do I not be complicit?
I mean, you have to bring, I saw something today and there's an activist in LA and she was like, you need to bring what you have, bring your skill sets to the movement, right? And stay plugged in. There is we had a big legislative victory here in Colorado, and there's this temptation probably, sort of like things to die off a little bit. We need people to stay engaged, people to stay super hyper-focused on continuing to look at all the different things that they can do. If you have a big platform, if you have tens of thousands of followers, right? Take a break from, promoting yourself or your business and raise some awareness, in the community. Use that to educate people on history, right? Use that to, if you are like,
bro, you don't even have to take a break. There's not a limit on how much you can post.
Right.
You can post as much as you want. Like I can Elliot Marshall brand and this issue brand. Like they're not like, oh, you only get one post today.
Right. Exactly. It's just, get in there, use your platform for something else other than, advancing yourself, right? Call your lawmakers. Like when you see stuff going through there, in Colorado, right? Learn about, how a bill it gets introduced, right? And then it first goes into a committee, and then it goes out of committee, and then it's on the floor of like the originating either House or Senate. And then if it goes there, then there's multiple votes. And at the whole time, you need to be putting pressure on the right lawmakers, right? Stay tuned into that. Follow someone on Twitter, who follow your representative on Twitter. Follow the person that actually introduced the bill, right? If you're like an artist, make some cool art and give it to people who are like in the space. There's just a need for all of these resources. And so, just take a break from using your skills and what you bring to the table to advance yourself and, have it advance the lives of other people, and we'll all improve our collective condition.
Be the union soldiers, right? Like go against what might be your self-interest. Exactly. And do what's good for the greater good of humanity, And I think that touched me. I listened to it yesterday. It was random, it was so poignant, So that's what we have to do. And like you said, man, like sure, everyone's not going to get out there and march, right? Everyone's not going to everyone doesn't have a voice where they don't know what to do, but you got something, right? You got something. Find that something, and that's powerful. That's really, really fucking powerful, and use it.
Yeah. My neighbor who, she doesn't, she's immune compromised. She's older. She wasn't going to go out to the marches. She doesn't have like a big online presence or anything like that. She like decked her bike out of all this like Black Lives Matter stuff. And then just kind of rode around our neighborhood for like the whole day. She like passed, I was out in front with my kids and she passed our house by like 5 times. Yeah. She's like trying to do something. She's trying to raise awareness. She's trying to like not let the movement die. Right. So just stay plugged in. And I think if people stay plugged in, if they continue to educate themselves, there's an incredible amount of resources online. All of these outlets that I wouldn't even expect. There's like if you click on Amazon, there's Amazon, Instagram, Facebook. There's all this stuff that like they're putting out to educate people sort of about all the different.
You can't miss it. Yeah, you can't miss it.
Plug in, educate yourself. And just stay involved. It doesn't have to mean you go to a protest, right? Right.
All right, man. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Yeah. No worries.
Guys, remember, look, I know most of you aren't lawyers, right? Like you're not going to do what Tyrone does. You're not going to go legislate a bill. You're not going to try somebody and like, I don't know, what'd you get? Like $1.7 million for people last year, something crazy, right? Like, but that's not your power. And I also understand for everyone, most people listening, you don't have a podcast, you know, and like where my power is this platform that I have where I can make awareness happen, you know, and then I have the schools where we can really spread awareness. I get it. That's not your power, but you got something. Find your something. Do one thing a day to keep awareness and keep the movement going. If you do that, man, that like, and you can get your friend to do that. Look at what that power would be. That would be fucking amazing. You know, and it's not localized. It's not just in Denver or Boulder or wherever the fuck you live. Get your friend in South Dakota and Missouri and wherever else they are. One person. If you got one person a day, holy shit, it'd be amazing for the greater good of all humanity. So go out there and find your power, everybody.